He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Some of us do.
I'm a big fan of preserving food.
My mum used to preserve and pickle.
Some of us don't.
We haven't done that ourselves, but yeah, I've certainly got friends that do it.
And some are thinking about it.
I think it's a very good idea. Be open to try.
Kia ora, I'm Katy Gosset and welcome to Thrift. This episode is all about pickling and preserving. I didn't think there'd be many sayings about pickles, but it shows how much I know. There are quite a few, and here's one of my favourites, from the American author and ethicist Rushworth Kidder. Good ideas, like good pickles, are crisp, enduring, and devilishly hard to make.
Morning.
Morning.
Would you like a cuppa? Tea? Coffee?
We're about to meet someone who makes good pickles, doesn't think they're hard to make, and also has some good ideas about how to save money.
Coffee would be awesome.
Coffee?
It's not a hassle.
No,
Is it a hassle?
Nah, not at all.
This is Catherine Riddell, or as some people call her,
Preserving Queen.
and a quick look around her house confirms that title.
Wow, this is Pickling Central, isn't it?
You reckon? Whatever gives you that idea.
Katherine's kitchen bench, her dining room table, just about every surface in her house is covered with jars of pickles. Big jars, small jars, tall jars. And to paint a further picture, it's very cosy in here. The fire is on, Katherine's dog is basking in front of it, and there's something on top of the wood burner.
It's a chutney that's been cooked low and slow on the fire all day, making the most of the fire and free power.
So yes, straight into the cost savings. Why put the oven on if you've got the fire going?
I love it. And I cook dinner on the fire most nights.
But today it's banana chutney.
Smells divine, doesn't it?
Yeah, it smells pretty good. We're going to be bottling that in a bit. But first, we've just been talking about enduring ideas, and this is a skill set that Katherine picked up from her grandmother.
So I've grown up going out and picking nectarines and golden queen peaches, and that's how it started for me. I've always done it.
Katherine reckons the whole pickling tradition skipped a generation here in New Zealand. She blames the advent of TV dinners and convenience foods in the 60s and 70s. But around the time she moved to Christchurch a few years ago, she noticed more people getting back into gardens and wanting to know what to do with their excess produce. She was also thinking about what to do for a job when she took a call from someone at a local community garden.
She said, "We've got a whole heap of cabbages. What can you do with those bad boys?"
As it happens, Katherine knew exactly what to do with those cabbages. She made them up into preserves and they were donated to people who needed them. She loves working with community groups, helping them use their produce, and has just done it again recently.
We got probably 60 jars of silver beet relish, and that'll just go into their kai boxes that they give out. Gives people a new way of looking at silver beet too.
We all need a new way of looking at silver beet. A friend then donated a pressure canner to the cause. Now, that's a device that allows the filled jars to be heated to a much higher level, so you can preserve low-acid foods like stews. Suddenly, Katherine was looking at a whole new career.
She says, "Oh, I'm giving this to you. Teach."
Around this time, her son helped her put up a Facebook page called Katherines Kitchen.
And within 48 hours it had like 500 likes, which apparently is quite good.
2 years on, she has 10,000 followers and travels the country running pickling and canning workshops.
It just happened. It's the right time. People are struggling and want to learn the old ways again.
So when it comes to saving money, the whole point of pickling and preserving is that you're taking something that's available now cheaply, whether it's on your tree or you're buying it cheaply from a greengrocer, and you're preparing it and putting it away for a later date. So tip 1 is really about where you find the core ingredients, that raw produce. And the first stop might be a local orchard.
They do boxes of seconds for $1 a kilo. Why not go and buy 10 kilo and stew them up and stick them in a used supermarket jar?
And don't be afraid to ask the seller directly.
Go to your greengrocer and say, "Do you have any fruit out the back that you'd be happy to sell me cheap?" It may work.
And Katherine says ask your neighbours or even people you don't know.
If you're just driving down a road and you see all these peaches on the ground, go knock on the door and ask. 9 out of 10 times, people are only too happy for you to pick the fruit.
And a wee sample of the finished product never goes amiss.
And then drop them back a couple of jars as a thank you. Then you're in for the next year.
You could also put it out there on your community Facebook page or marketplace, or have an arrangement where you swap produce with your friends. Now, while of course you can pickle at any time of the year, summer is when there's a lot of produce around. So in the lead up, Katherine recommends gradually stocking up on sugar, vinegar and spices.
You go in during the season to find something at the supermarket and you can't find it anywhere.
Does that suggest that a lot of people are pickling then?
Yep, absolutely. People are getting back into it.
I spend a lot of time making sauces and jam.
Yeah, I actually have a few friends that do it. They often give me little jars.
Also, why don't you check out our episode on food waste from last season, and you'll hear some other great reasons to get into pickling.
I love using unusual fruit and veggies that aren't considered sellable. Why waste it?
So once you've got your ingredients together, tip 2, or our second little group of tips, is around just getting our heads around how pickling actually works. I have to get my head around it too, because it's at this point that I make a certain admission to Katherine. Okay, confession time. I have never, ever pickled anything.
Well, you need to come to a workshop then, don't you, darling?
And while I'm admitting to ignorance, what actually is the difference between a chutney and a relish?
A relish is 9.5 times out of 10 thickened with some kind of flour. A chutney is got generally fruit and veggies in it, and it's just left to reduce slowly and thicken itself.
Then there's the taste.
With a chutney, the flavour gets better with age, but a relish you can tend to eat straight away.
Well, there you go. I never knew that. So you can use almost any kind of fruit and veg, but most chutneys and relishes also have vinegar and sugar as preservatives. The acetic acid in the vinegar helps kill off microorganisms and prevents spoilage. And Katherine says that strong taste of vinegar usually mellows pretty quickly.
But it's really important that you have that kind of acid because that's what helps preserve it.
As for the sugar, it reduces the water available for microorganisms to grow in, and you can play around with those levels.
So in the old days, they used to do everything in a heavy syrup. 3 cups of sugar to 3 cups of water.
But then you also had a medium syrup.
2 cups of sugar to 3 cups of water.
And a light syrup.
1 cup of sugar to 3 cups of water.
So, just like Goldilocks, you can try all the sugar syrups and pick the one that suits you.
I tend to do 1/2 cup of sugar to 3 cups of water.
And now, when it comes to something like jam, you can use maple syrup or even chia seeds to help set and thicken the jam. But
the problem is, because they don't have all that sugar in to preserve it, they're not shelf stable.
And it's pretty important because the whole point of making preserves is that you want to be able to put them on a shelf and know you can safely eat them some months later.
Must be time. Excitement. We're going to boil the jug so we can put the boiling water over the lid.
All right.
I'll just get my funnel out.
So this leads us to tip 3, which is more like a group of tips about the practical side of preserving, the tools of the trade, and how to avoid breaking jars and so on. I must admit, I've always been a bit nervous about putting jars into the hot oven and the potential for them to shatter.
There are loads of people out there that are intimidated by that, and it's just because you don't know what you're doing. You haven't been shown.
But I'm getting a masterclass from Katherine. Her jars are currently in the oven at 100 degrees for at least 15 minutes. And speaking of the jars, obviously quite an important part of the operation, they're not flash ones.
You don't need fancy equipment just to start out.
Ask your friends for pasta jars or jam jars as long as the lids on the inside aren't dirty, rusted or damaged.
All good. Look at that, it's starting to boil nicely.
And the seals are also waiting in boiling water.
So hot jars, hot product, hot seals. If you can pick the jar up with your fingers, it's probably not hot enough to be putting product into.
So now it's time to put it all into action. Katherine grabs the banana chutney off the fire.
Oh, I can smell it now.
You can smell the banana in it, eh?
From there, Katherine actually bottles up the chutney pretty quickly using her jug and funnel because you don't want any of your elements to cool down.
So now you get your tea towel, screw your lid on as tight as you can. Ouch! Ouch! See, I wasn't holding that properly. Burnt me little ends.
and the job is pretty much done.
Everything will just be left to cool and it'll seal good to go. It is honestly that simple.
Still, just a couple of wee troubleshooting points. Firstly, don't put anything hot, like a jar, onto a cold surface. Katherine uses a silicone mat. Then, once it's cooled down, store your preserves in a cool place, like maybe a cupboard in a spare room. And before you put them away, just check for any rogue, unsealed jars.
A good lid to use is like, the pop-top lids that have got like the little buttons in, and then you'll know whether they've sealed or not. If you push on it and it like does that whole thing that a pop-top does.
It's not a technical term, Katherine, I'm afraid.
It is in my world.
But you get the picture. If the pop-up lid is still able to be popped and hasn't been pulled downwards, then the jar is not sealed, which isn't the end of the world. You can just chuck it in the fridge and eat it first. But do keep checking on any pickles you have stored. If the lid is bulging or it smells bad, then discard it.
But once you know, it'll be a skill that's with you for the rest of your life.
The good news for me is that now the bottling is done, I get to sample some of Katherine's other pickles.
Right, this is a hearty ale, onion and swede chutney.
They're all very good, and I'd be hard-pressed to pick a favourite, except maybe the silver beet chutney. I have to say I didn't love silver beet as a child, but Katherine's made it into something quite amazing.
Chow here.
And in fact, Katherine's built a whole business out of what she calls the old ways. She's very generous with her time and her skills and her recipes. There are only 2 that she keeps for herself.
Grandmama's tomato sauce and her garlic sauce recipe, just because they're precious to me and they hold precious memories.
Although they will ultimately be passed down. Katherine's son and his wife are eager to learn the tomato sauce recipe.
So I've told them that I'm going to hide it in the house somewhere and leave a treasure map in my will, so at least I'll know that they'll go through everything before they dump it in the skip.
In fact, her true legacy is likely to be the skills she's given to others.
I get so excited when people send me photos of stuff that they've done after coming to a workshop. Nothing can ever replace that feeling. Nothing. It's priceless. How can you not get excited about that? I love it. It's just giving people the skills and the confidence just to give it a go. And then they're feeding their families. People are really struggling. I don't know how to articulate it, really.
I'd say she's doing a pretty awesome job both at articulating it and helping a lot of people in her community. So, a quick recap. Get yourself some raw ingredients. Don't be afraid to ask your friends, neighbours, people with trees, and even fruit and veg shops for cheaper produce. Work out how much sugar you like, and accept you'll probably need at least some and some vinegar to preserve your concoction. When it comes to bottling up, everything has to be hot, hot, hot. The preserves, the jars, and the seals. Afterwards, store your masterpiece in a nice cool place and eat it with lots of cheese. Finally, remember, it's not too intimidating. I am actually planning to do some pickling myself. When it's done, you'll be the first to know. Unless, of course, it's a dismal failure, and then I'll keep it to myself. Now, next time on Thrift, car maintenance, we'll learn some easy checks that we can carry out ourselves. To check out that episode and others, make sure you follow us on your favourite podcast app. Special thanks to my guest in this ep, the preserving queen herself, Katherine Riddell. This podcast was produced and presented by me, Katy Gosset. It was mixed by Alex Harmer, and Tim Watkin is the executive producer of podcasts and series. If you have a tip to share, you can email us at thrift@rnz.co.nz. Thanks for listening. Ka kite.